evening, and welcome to the Revelation Explained. Tonight we are, after a 2-week hiatus, continuing our study through the book of Daniel. But don't worry, if you haven't been with us for the past 2 weeks, you've missed some stuff, but we're going to cover the important stuff, and we will then move on. And we're actually going to go through the rest of chapter 1. So, I'm glad that you're here. You can leave a comment if you would like. That way I can interact with you, and we can talk. And if you have any questions or complaints or comments, please let me know. I would love to hear them, and I will do my best to answer them, even if they don't pertain to the topic at hand. So let us jump right in so that we can get to this, and we can get through it in a reasonable amount of time. We're actually going to begin with Daniel chapter 1, starting with verse 8. So let me pull up the old Bible here, and we are going to read right here from chapter 1, verse 8 down through 21. Listen to what Daniel writes here. But Daniel made up his mind that he would not defile himself with the king's choice food or with the wine. And actually, I'm going to make this a little bit bigger, because when I went back to look at the video, it's a little bit difficult to read. Which he drank. So he sought permission from the commander of the officials that he might not defile himself. Now God granted Daniel favor and compassion in the sight of the commander of the officials. And the commander of the officials said to Daniel, I am afraid of my lord the king, who has appointed your food and your drink. For why should he see your faces looking more haggard than the youths who are your own age? Then you would make me forfeit my head to the king. But Daniel said to the overseer, whom the commander of the officials had appointed over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, remember that's Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, please test your servants for 10 days, and let us be given some vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then let our appearance be observed in your presence and the appearance of the youths who are eating the king's choice food, and deal with your servants according to what you see. So he listened to them in this matter and tested them for 10 days. At the end of 10 days, their appearance seemed better, and they were fatter than all the youths who had been eating the king's choice food. Take note of that, because that's a significant point. They were fatter. So the overseer continued to withhold their choice food and the wine they were to drink, and kept giving them vegetables. As for these 4 youth, God gave them knowledge and intelligence in every branch of literature and wisdom. Daniel even understood all kinds of visions and dreams. Then at the end of the days which the king had specified for presenting them, the commander of the officials presented them before Nebuchadnezzar. The king talked with them, and out of them all, not one was found like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So they entered the king's personal service. As for every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king consulted them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and conjurers who were in all his realm. And Daniel continued until the first year of Cyrus the king. So, if you'll remember, if you were with us last time, we talked about how Daniel and his friends have been taken away from their homes and everything they know and brought to a foreign country, this foreign country of Babylon. But they haven't just been brought to another country, they have been put through a rigorous Babylonian university program that involved learning the Babylonian language, and not just the language of the common people, but the language of their literature, of their law, of their legal system and government system and all of that. And so they now understand the Babylonian language, they understand Babylonian mythology, Babylonian religion, and they're even taught how to foretell the future using Babylonian methods, like astrology and dream interpretation and liver reading. And liver reading, they'd slaughter an animal and they'd take out its liver, and they would go through and decide, well, because there's this lump here on this side of the liver, this is what's going to happen, and on and on and on. So Daniel and his friends are put through this rigorous training program, and their names were changed to reflect pagan gods rather than the God of Israel, because Hananiah, Azariah, Mishael, and Daniel all have the God of Israel as a part of their name, either El or Yah. And all of their names are changed so that their names reflect pagan ideas and pagan gods. And in fact, and I don't know if I mentioned this last time, but there's even a possibility, some scholars believe, back at the beginning, it talks about them, the commander of the officials, this Azariah, I think what his name is, or Ashpenaz rather, that he's called a eunuch, and there's some talk about Daniel and his friends being eunuchs, in other words, that they may have been castrated. So we're talking about a complete and total transformation that took place with Daniel and his friends. And they're living in this hostile culture, and they have to figure out how to navigate all of these foreign ideas and these foreign religions, and they've been taken away from all the things that they grew up with and that their families had taught them from the time that they were born until the day that they were taken away. So this whole book is dealing with this question of how do the people of God stay faithful in a hostile culture. Now, I don't know about you, but that sounds like something that we could use some teaching on, some understanding on. That's why I think Daniel's such a great book for us, is I think we could learn a thing or two about how to deal with our culture, with a hostile culture, by examining Daniel's response and experience in his culture, both here in chapter 1 as well as through the rest of Daniel's book. So let's try and get our minds around what exactly is going on in these 13, 14 verses. Before we can go too far, we really have to understand something about the Babylonians and what they expected of their wise men. We need to understand what, when a Babylonian young person went through Babylon U to become a wise man, what was he expected to come out like on the other end of the table of the whole system. And in particular, we ought to ask ourselves the question: what's this whole deal about eating the king's choice food, and why does this matter? Why is this even a big deal? So let's start there. The archaeological evidence that we have unearthed and uncovered in Babylon, we've in all of that we have discovered some sculptures and some reliefs, which are like sculptures in a wall, almost like painting 3D kind of sculptures in the wall. And there are some of them that portray wise men and portray kings and portray warriors. And so we have an idea based on that, because if you look at the way a culture's art portrays its people, you'll kind of get an idea of what their ideal is. Think about in our culture, if you go and look at magazines, go into the grocery store and look at the magazines, and you see the men and women on the covers of those magazines, that is the way that we, as American, as a culture, that's the way we idealize what men and women are supposed to look like. And so this isn't something new. This is something that goes back to the ancient times, And we've seen some of these sculptures and things, and so we have an idea of how Babylonians thought their kings and warriors and wise men should look. Now, kings and warriors look like you would expect them to look. They look strong. They're, got all these muscles. They look like they're ready to fight. They've got their weapons. They're ready to do battle. But that is not the way that wise men are portrayed in the pictures of ancient Babylon. Instead, wise men are idealized. The perfect wise man, according to all the imagery that we see in these sculptures and things, are bald, they're chubby, and they have big eyes. And that is the way that wise men, the perfect wise men, are portrayed in ancient Babylon. They're chubby, they're bald, and they've got big eyes. And so I've got 2 out of 3. I might be able to make a good Babylonian wise man if I were to go back in time. Anyway, this is the way that they viewed the ideal wise man. It was somebody who was chubby, bald, and had these big eyes, because the eyes, large eyes, symbolized intelligence to the Babylonians. So what better way to get your young wise men who are going through school to become, these expert, great wise men, chubby, than by feeding them the very best food possible? And that is exactly what the Babylonians are doing, not only to Daniel and Hananiah and Azariah and Mishael, but also to all of the other young people that they've gathered from all over the world to turn into wise men that they can then use both to govern at home and abroad. Is you feed them the best food, and you give them plenty of it, and it's not like they're exercising because they're spending all their time studying, so they get chubby. And that is what's going on here, and this is the reason that it's such a big deal that they eat this food, because the Babylonians and Nebuchadnezzar is trying to create the perfect wise man, and this is part of what that looks like. He wants the look and not just the mind. So this also symbolizes that when someone was eating from the king's table, then the king was he was the one who was providing for them. And so he had a measure of authority, you might say, over them. They were in fellowship with the king, and he was the one who was sustaining them and providing for them and keeping them going. They were dependent on the king. So keep those 2 things in mind as we look at this, that they're trying to mold Daniel and the rest of these folks into perfect wise men by actually changing the way that they look through the food that they're giving him, and that they are, making them dependent on the king. So with that in mind, now we can look at how Daniel responds to all of this. And we see it right here at the very beginning, that Daniel made up his mind that he would not defile himself. In Hebrew, this made up his mind is he set his heart. He set on his heart that he determined that he was not going to defile himself with the king's choice food or with the wine which he drank. Now, there's a lot of, if you start reading about Daniel, reading about this chapter, what you'll discover, there's a lot of debate on why exactly Daniel is refusing the king's choice food. Some will say it has to do with the Old Testament kosher laws. All of those dietary laws in the Old Testament about not eating pork. In fact, the Babylonians were known for not only eating pork, but they also ate horse. And this was something that the Israelites did not do. And this would have been unkosher. It would have caused them to break the law. So there are a lot of people that say, well, this must be the reason that Daniel has determined not to defile himself, because he doesn't want to break the Old Testament laws. But I'm not so sure that that's really what's going on here. And the reason I say that is he also doesn't want to defile himself with the wine which the king drank, when there's nothing in the Old Testament dietary laws about drinking wine. And so there's no command that you can't drink wine other than, unless you're a Nazirite, unless you've got some special calling. There's nothing in the Old Testament law about not drinking wine, and drinking wine over there would not have defiled Daniel. So it seems as if maybe there's something else going on than just that Daniel doesn't want to submit to, doesn't want to sin by eating food that God has said not to eat. There are some people that will say, well, all of this food that was at the king's table would have come from food, that animals that had been sacrificed to idols. And as a result, Daniel doesn't want to eat anything that's been sacrificed to idols. But I'm not so sure that that is really the case either, because there's nothing in the Old Testament about eating food sacrificed to idols. That's really not something that comes up until the New Testament era with Paul and the church and, Judaism at that time. So we don't really have that conversation back in Daniel's time. So I'm not really sure that that is the reason. And here's the reality that we really need to come to terms with, that even if that was kind of on Daniel's mind, all of the food would have been defiled in Babylon, not just the meat. The vegetables would have been defiled too. All of it would have been unclean, because it would have all been, sort of mixed in together with non-kosher food, and when you mix it all in together, it becomes unclean. So everything that they would have eaten would have been unclean. In fact, this is something that Ezekiel, God speaks through Ezekiel, that in Ezekiel chapter 4, verse 13, he says, thus will the sons of Israel eat their bread unclean among the nations where I will banish them. So God says, whenever he sends Israel into exile, you're going to have to eat unclean food, because you're going to a people and you're going to be, serving a people who don't care about keeping food according to the laws that I've given you and that I gave you at Mount Sinai. So no matter what Daniel would have eaten, it would have been unclean in that sense. Even the vegetables would have been unclean in that sense. So because of this, I don't think that Daniel's unwillingness to defile himself is really about avoiding non-kosher food. I think there's actually something else. And there's another thing that's sort of significant here that a lot of people miss, and that's if you go all the way to Daniel 10:3, which I guess we can do. If we go to Daniel 10:3, we read this, where Daniel says, in the 3rd year of Cyrus, king of Persia, a message was revealed to Daniel, who was named Belteshazzar, and the message was true and one of great conflict, but he understood the message and had an understanding of the vision. In those days, I, Daniel, had been mourning for 3 entire weeks. Right here, it's clear that later on, when Daniel is under Cyrus and the Persians, that he did eat tasty food. He did eat the food from the king's table. He ate meat and he ate wine. So if Daniel was concerned about the food not being kosher in Daniel 1, if that was really what his concern was with being defiled, then why would he start eating it later on when it was under the Persians and they would have had the same kind of unclean food? It's obvious, if you take all of this sort of evidence into account, that chapter 1 of Daniel, this verse 8 through 21, is not primarily about Daniel being afraid of being defiled because he's eating food that is not kosher, that's not pleasing to God, that there's actually something else that is going on here. I think there's more than meets the eye. So what is this defilement that Daniel is trying to avoid? I think it's less about food laws and more about identity. Daniel's identity is what is at stake here. See, back in Daniel's day, and I think we've talked about this before, back in Daniel's day, food and identity went hand in hand, and they were very often bound together, even more so for Jews who had very strict laws about what you could and couldn't eat, and in turn who you could and couldn't have fellowship with at a table, who you couldn't, could or couldn't sit down and eat with. See, back in Daniel's day, and just in the past, especially in the ancient world, it was a big deal when you ate with someone. It wasn't something like it is today, where it's just, we don't even think anything about it. There's just nothing even there. But for them, it was a very big deal to eat with someone. It symbolized a great deal, and what you ate symbolized a great deal, and so. It really did for Daniel. It represented his identity as a follower of the Lord. And if he were to sit down at the table of the king and eat the king's food, it would be more than just getting something to eat. Daniel had been taken away from everything that he knew, from his whole culture, from all of his family, from his religion, from everything, and he'd been put in this other place. And he was holding on to his identity as a follower of Yahweh by not giving up this one thing, and that is the food. He wasn't going to totally commit himself to Babylonian ways of life and go in and eat the stuff that comes from the king's table and acknowledge the king's authority over him and acknowledge that the king is the one who is controlling or who is providing for him and who is sustaining him. Daniel is unwilling to fully subsume his identity under the identity of Babylon. So he would not take any more food from the king than he absolutely had to. He was going to resist being conformed to the patterns of his world. And he was going to do that in a fairly subtle way, and that was to not eat the food from the king's table. And I think he's also doing something else. Remember what I said earlier, that for the Babylonians, a wise man was bald, chubby, and had big eyes. And what Daniel is doing, if he's only eating vegetables and drinking water, he's not going to get chubby. At least not if only the natural is as at work. It's just not going to happen. There's not a whole lot of obese vegans out there. And so Daniel is doing something out of a commitment and a faith in God. And he's saying, I am going to give God the space to work so that God can provide for me and he can make me what I need to be, and it won't be because I submitted to a king. It will be because he did it, because he's the one that's really got the authority over me. So Daniel resists the food from the king during this time especially, because this is preparation time when Daniel's being trained. And so he resists the king so that he can give himself wholly to God. And I also think, so think about it, this part with me, that here Daniel's being bombarded culturally with all of these false beliefs and these false ideas, with this Babylonian mythology and Babylonian literature and the Babylonian way of life and culture and everything. And I think when we are bombarded like that with a hostile culture that is just hitting us with all of the secular ideology and the secular mythology and on and on and on, and they're just trying to shape us, we have to hold on to something to remind us that this world is not our home, that this culture we're living in is not the culture where we belong. And even if, we sort of make accommodations in a lot of places, if we don't hold on to something and say, this one thing is going to remind me each and every day that this is not mine, that I don't belong here, if we don't do that, we will get sucked under and we will become just like the rest of the culture. And I think that Daniel is putting a stake in the ground and saying, I will not go any further than this. And this is part of the reason why I believe that Daniel is not willing to eat this food. I believe that today we have a similar decision to make as Daniel's culture, because we live in a hostile culture. We live in a culture that is teaching us its language, that's teaching us how to speak, how to think. It's teaching us its mythology and its beliefs and its practices. It is shaping our identity, trying to get us to think of ourselves in secular terms rather than in Christian terms, so that we are first I mean, just all of the identities that are out there. There's lots and lots and lots of them. And part of what Christianity is about is breaking down identities. I mean, this is what the whole book of Ephesians is about, is that Christ has broken down the wall that separated identities, and he's brought people together and made them one in him. And here we are in our culture being tempted to erect all of these walls and to put all of these things up and say, well, I'm middle class and you're lower class and he's upper class. And we're erecting walls. Or I'm white and he's black and she's Hispanic and that guy's Chinese, and we're erecting these walls. Or, I'm conservative and he's liberal and he's a moderate, or whatever. And again, we're erecting these walls. And I think this is a real temptation that we have when Christ has come to break down walls. And we are allowing our identity to be shaped by the culture rather than holding on to our identity in Christ and saying there is nothing that is going to shape me like my identity in Jesus. This is why we need to draw lines in the sand and resist, just like Daniel did. We have to have something in our minds. Listen, if we don't come up with something tangible where we plant a stake in the ground and say, this is, no matter what, I'm not crossing over this line. If we don't commit ourselves to that resistance, we will inevitably fall into the pull, the undertow of the culture and be dragged out to sea. We have got to be willing to make a commitment somewhere and say, I will go no further than right here. And I think we need to do some deep soul searching. I believe this is what Daniel did. That's why it doesn't just say Daniel said he would not defile himself. It says Daniel made up his mind, or he set his heart that he would not defile himself. Daniel has deeply reflected and has done some soul searching, and I'm sure has done a tremendous amount of praying based on what we read about Daniel throughout the rest of his book, and asked God, where is the line that has to be drawn? What is going to keep me from just getting pulled right into the rest of this Babylonian culture and becoming just like a Babylonian and totally losing my identity as one of your followers? I believe that Daniel did some real soul searching so he could determine where that place was. And once he discovered it, he planted a stake in it and said, this is it. I'm not from Jesus and from his way and his beliefs and the way he thinks and speaks as any of the opposition that we have. Look, I think this is something that's really important. Sometimes it's hard for us to hear. It's hard for us to reflect on, especially in the highly polarized and politicized culture that we live in right now. I personally don't know in my lifetime that I've ever seen our country be as polarized and politicized as it is today. We as Christians have to stand and set ourselves apart. We have to set ourselves apart from all of it. Listen, no group of people, no organization on this earth, no media venue sets the agenda for God's people. There is no political party, neither the Republican Party nor the Democrat Party sets the agenda for God's people and God's kingdom. There is no politician, neither Joe Biden nor Donald Trump nor anybody else, that sets the agenda for God's kingdom and God's people. There is no media venue or social media platform that sets the agenda rather, for God's kingdom and God's people. And there is no nation, neither the United States nor Israel, the modern nation state of Israel, nor any other country that sets the agenda for God's kingdom or God's people. God's kingdom transcends them all. This is why in Revelation chapter 7, we read where John looks out and he sees a multitude that no man can number, he says. And it's made up of every tribe and tongue and nation that you could possibly imagine. John looks out at that and he has this revelation that God's people is not just made up of those physical descendants of Abraham that we call Jews or Israelites. That God's people are made up of all of those who have put their faith in Christ and who have united themselves to the one true Israelite, Jesus. He is the one who is king. He is the one who gives us the unity that we need. He is the one that sets the agenda for God and God's people. Now, what is the significance to all of this? Because if we if we spend all of our time consuming the marching orders of earthly powers and people, if we spend 5 hours a day consuming the marching orders of media outlets and politicians and celebrities and on, even celebrity pastors, if we allow them, if we consume hours and hours of those marching orders, and then we come to Scripture, we come to the Word of God, and we spend a couple of minutes reading a daily Bible verse or a brief devotion, then what is going to happen inevitably, and what would have happened to Daniel if he wouldn't have set the stake in the sand, is we are going to start to think that what it means to follow Jesus and be a Christian is what these people out in the world are saying, even good people. But there is no human being on earth that sets the agenda for God's kingdom and God's people. Not even the best, not even good Christian people. You can have the best Christian in the world. He or she does not set the agenda for God's kingdom and God's people. Only God sets that agenda. And we can only hear it in the voice of Christ and in the Word of God. When our agenda for life is wholly set by any of these things, and I'll be honest with you, I see it on every side. I know a lot of people just focus on the Christians on the right, and there's a lot of Christians on the right that let the politicians set the agenda for what they think the kingdom's about. But I know also a lot of Christians on the left who seem to let the agenda be set by their politicians. And I look at both sides and I think, let us all look to Christ to set the agenda for His kingdom and for His will and for us as His people. This is why, and I want to share this with you because I think this is something it's hard for us to swallow, and I may make people mad. If I do, I apologize that you're mad, but I don't apologize for saying what I'm going to say, because I believe that it's 100% true. And it's this: living in a quote unquote Christian nation, it is more spiritually dangerous to live in a quote unquote Christian nation than it is to live in a wholly secular nation. Now, it's more dangerous physically to live in a secular nation like China. Don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that it's more difficult to be a Christian in a place like the United States. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying it is more spiritually dangerous. And the reason why is this: because in a secular nation like China, there is no way on earth that you are ever going to confuse the kingdom of God for the nation where you're living. You understand, and there's always that distinction, that you are living in Babylon. That you, like Daniel, are living in Babylon, and the only way to survive is to live in resistance to that culture, and not to, sort of allow yourself to get sucked under into it. And the reason it's so clear is because the difference is so striking, right? I mean, if you're a Christian living in China, you're not living in the kingdom because they don't want you. I mean, they're trying to kill you. They're trying to stamp you out. You don't have any kind of freedom. But when you live in a country like America, which I believe wholly is the greatest nation that ever has been, I mean, I have tremendous confidence in it. I believe in the everything that it means to be an American. And though, I think that we've had sins, I also think that, there's nowhere else I would rather live. And I think that we've offered people freedom and opportunities that they haven't had anywhere else in the world. But there is a spiritual danger that comes with that. And the spiritual danger is I start to think that the kingdom and my culture are the same. And I start to think that all that we need to do is sort of, we don't really need to resist the culture. We just sort of need to change the culture to be more like Christ. And here's what the reality is that whether you're living in China or you're living in America, you're living in Babylon. Now, one may be a whole lot better than the other, and I believe it is. But in both of them, you're still living in Babylon. You're still living in a culture that at its core is going to desire to supplant God with itself, because governments, and this is one of the things I think Revelation teaches pretty clearly, especially in Revelation 13, is that governments have this because of sin. Governments and the way that they have this desire to become like God and to become God, and they will try and push God out of the play, out of the arena, so that they can be worshipped and they can be like God. And I think that happens to every government. I think there are governments that start out very good, but there is this inevitable bent towards the government wants to be God and wants to have that worship. And there's all kinds of reasons why, and I could go into that, but I don't want to, because I really want to get back to what we're talking about here. But the whole point in saying all of this is this, that what we need to realize is that even though we may look around and we may think, but America is a Christian nation, and we've got this heritage, and we're built on Judeo-Christian principles and all this, and all that, yeah, we are built on Judeo-Christian principles and on and on and on. Totally agree. But we're still living in Babylon, because if you look around, that's just where we're at as a culture. Culturally, this is a Babylonian culture. It's a culture where pornography is rampant, and is just everywhere, and not just pornography, but just the sexual immorality. I read an article today, and I'm kind of getting off, but it just so disturbed me. I read an article today that was talking about. There's a website where during the pandemic especially, there's been a lot of young women who have created accounts on this website, and allows them to post pornography, and then people subscribe to their accounts so that they can view their pornography, and they pay them a monthly fee. And the article was about a girl, this young woman who was doing this, and she got a message from her cousin's husband. And the cousin's husband said, "Hey, I've been watching your performances, and I just want you to know that you're my little secret." And the woman and her sister, the sister I think was the one who actually wrote into the media organization, and it was kind of like a Dear Abby thing, and they were asking the question, "What do we do about this?" But the woman who had been contacted by her cousin's brother, or her cousin's husband, and was being told, "Hey, I've been watching you, perform, and you're my dirty little secret," is what he told her. That these women were like, what a creep. Yeah, he is a creep, absolutely. But this is the kind of culture that we live in now, where pornography is not just something that those people out there do, and we sort of tolerate it, but it's something that everyone is doing, and that family members are now. I mean, it's creating these incestuous, just weird stuff, and it is acceptable, and seen as okay. That's a Babylonian culture, and that's the culture that we're living in. Turn on a TV and you see we're living in a Babylonian culture. Whether we're talking about the obsession with sex or the violence that we see. I mean, all you have to do is look around you, and you quickly realize that we are living in a Babylonian culture. And because of that, we need to be aware of that. We need to remember that, because since we're living in a Babylonian culture, we must live as Daniels, in resistance. We need to draw lines in the sand and say, I am not going to cross over here. If we don't, we will go down a path of where nothing holy and godly lies. We cannot be divided by all of the things that the world wants to divide us up by. It is destroying the church. We're being divided up by race and by worldly politics and by claims of secret knowledge and by just all kinds of stuff. And it is destroying the church. And I wholly believe we need to repent, and we need to get our house in order as Christians. We have spent a lot of time trying to tell the world how to live and what to do and all of that. And I think maybe we need to do some inward soul searching and say, are we living as Daniels? Are we committed ourselves to, saying we'll go no further? Or are we just getting swept along in the culture right along with the rest of the world, So Daniel refused to fully identify with Babylon and with the Babylonian culture. He retained his identity as a follower of Yahweh, of the God of Israel, by refusing to eat the king's food. Now, when he does this, the servant is concerned, and you can see what he says here. I am afraid of my lord the king. I am afraid of my lord the king, who has appointed your food and your drink. For why should he see your faces looking more haggard than the youths who are your own age? Then you would make me forfeit my head to the king. Basically, this guy says, listen, if you don't eat all this good food, you won't get fat. And if you don't get fat, the king's going to ask why. And if the king asks why, we're going to have to tell him that I've been feeding you vegetables instead of all the good fatty food. And then he's going to kill me because he's the one who said this is what you feed them. So Daniel says, listen, let's just test it out. Give me a week and a half. Give me 10 days. And at the end of those 10 days, you can see how we look. See, please test your servants for 10 days. Let us be given some vegetables to eat, water to drink. Then let our appearance be observed. So this is what the guy does. He gives them 10 days to try this. Daniel is quietly resisting. And at the end of the 10 days, now look what it says. At the end of the 10 days, their appearance seemed better, and they were fatter than all the youths who had been eating the king's choice food. Why is it significant that they were fatter? Well, because like I said earlier, the perfect wise man in Babylonian eyes was a guy who was bald and fat and had big eyes. And so that's why it points out and it singles out this idea that they were fatter than all of the rest of the youths, because they were becoming the perfect wise men. They looked more like a wise man, is essentially what he's saying, than any of the others. And this convinces the overseer to keep doing what Daniel and his friends had asked him to do. So Daniel and his friends, they put a stake in the ground and they say, listen, we are not going to go beyond this. We're not going to eat the king's food. We are going to retain our identity. And no matter what happens, no matter how tempting something may be, no matter how delicious that food looks, we aren't going to eat it. We are committed to being, to trusting that God will take care of us, to trusting that he is able to provide for us better than the king, and that he can make us what we need to be to survive here better than the king and better than any natural means. And if we keep reading, what we'll see is that God does that. Not only does he make them fatter, so does he make them look more like a wise man than anybody else, but we also see right here in verse 17 that God gave them knowledge and intelligence in every branch of literature and wisdom. Daniel even understood all kinds of visions and dreams. And so from this, we get the idea that not only does Daniel make them look, or God make them look the part of the wise man, the perfect wise man, but God also gives them the understanding, the wisdom, the intelligence, the knowledge, so that they'll be able to play the part of the perfect wise man in Babylon. And that they will then be able to be elevated to this place within the government, that they can begin to have an influence and an impact. And that is really what the rest of Daniel is about. So this Daniel chapter 1 is setting up what's going to happen. It's giving us the kind of a background and understanding of how Daniel and his friends got into these high positions. It's because God was at work. And it's because Daniel didn't decide, well, hey, we've got to really play the part here. We've got to do what can we do to make sure that we're the smartest and that we look the part so we can have an influence. Let's see if we can lobby the right people. Let's see if we can, make the right choices so we can get in there. No, the way Daniel did it was, I'm going to trust God. I'm going to trust God that he is better at fixing this and at dealing with these issues than I am. And so I'm going to fast, essentially. I'm not going to eat any of their food. And I'm going to make space, make room for God to work and to do what only he can do. And I'm going to trust him. This is what Daniel does. And as a result, Daniel and his friends, or this is what God does. Did I say that or did I say, well, whatever. This is what God does. And as a result, Daniel is elevated to the very top position. In fact, if you go down here to verse 19 and 20, you see the king talked with them, and out of them all, not one was found like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah. So they entered the king's personal service. How did they get in the king's personal service? It wasn't because they ate the best food. It wasn't because they had the best teachers. It was because they trusted God, and God was at work in their midst. They didn't rest on natural means, but they trusted a supernatural God who was able to take vegetables and turn them into the fattest people in the Babylonian university. And then if you keep reading, it says, as for every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king consulted them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and conjurers who were in all his realm. You see, by refusing to fully identify with Babylon, by refusing to receive fellowship with the king, Daniel and his friends were making space for God to work. They were truly trusting. They were trusting in the idea that Moses talked about, that man does not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God. And because of their faith, God blessed them and made them the top of the class, valedictorian and salutatorian of Babylonian U. And he put them in a place where they could be influential. But it wasn't because they made all the right decisions and they were just so clever and smart and they ate the right food. No, it was because they trusted God to do the work that they could not do themselves. And what I believe we as the church need to do today, I think there's been a temptation that we have faced for a number of years where we have thought that if we work it out, if we make the right decisions, if we pour in the right amount of money, if we do this or do that, then we will make the changes that need taking place. And it's not working. It never will, because we cannot do God's work apart from God's power. And we cannot accomplish a supernatural end with natural means. And I don't care how much lobbying we do to change the culture and to try and pass laws and everything else, and all that has its place. I'm not saying that it doesn't. But my goodness, the money that we spend on lobbying, and I'm talking about Christians, across the board, the money that goes into lobbying that could go into missions and transforming hearts and minds. And I'm just going to speak something that's true, and it's hard for us to, I know it's hard. But we cannot change the culture unless we change the people. The only way that this culture is going to change, the only way that we're going to see a revival is not if there's somebody new in Washington. The only way we're going to see a revival is if God begins to work in my heart and he teaches me to trust him. And as I trust him, other people see it and they say, man, I want to have that kind of faith. I want to have that kind of love. I want to have that kind of joy and peace and patience and kindness and goodness and faithfulness and gentleness and self-control. I want to be like that. Hey, tell me, what's your secret? And I say, well, let me tell you, there's a God in heaven who's able to do above and beyond anything that we can ask or expect or think or imagine. See, we're not going to change the culture by, by all the stuff that we tend to think. We're going to change the culture one person at a time as the gospel takes root and changes people. This is what Daniel and Hananiah and Mishael and Azariah were trusting in, that God was able to do the work that no one could do. And we as the church need to recognize the same. So there's three kind of principles that I would encourage you to reflect on and think about that we draw out of Daniel chapter 1. The first is we need to recognize that we are living as God's resistance in Babylon. Yes, even here in the United States. Although America may have a lot of people who claim Christianity, though she may have a history filled with, well-known Christians who did lots of Christian things, though she may be built on Judeo-Christian principles, I think all of those things are true, yet she is still Babylon, though I believe the best Babylon that we've got. As Peter says, though, we must live as strangers and as pilgrims and as foreigners. We need to long for a better country, a heavenly one where righteousness dwells. And as a result, we need to recognize that this culture we live in is a Babylonian culture. And the only way we're going to change it is if we live like the resistance, is if we live faithfully as the people of God, that is our number one priority. As Jesus said, there's lots of things to worry about. Read Matthew, the end of chapter 6. Jesus says, he says that the Gentiles seek after what to eat and what to wear. He says, but you seek first the kingdom of heaven, the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. That must be our number one priority, the kingdom of God. And we are that resistance living in the midst of a Babylon. We need to recognize that. The second thing I think we need to recognize is that resisting the culture can be respectful. Notice that Daniel doesn't make demands, that he doesn't throw food in the servant's face and say, get this garbage out of here. He doesn't act like a jerk. There's sometimes it feels like there are some Christians who seem like the only way they know to resist the culture is by lashing out and getting angry and being the biggest jerks in town. Daniel wasn't that way. He simply told the servant. He told him what he wanted to do. He said, listen, I'd really rather not eat this. And the servant said, okay. And he said, he respectfully suggested an experiment. Said, listen, test me. Give me 10 days. And the servant was willing to do that. We can resist the culture without acting like idiots, and we should. Sometimes it's as simple as refusing to participate in something that the culture celebrates. And there are plenty of things that our culture celebrates that we would be wise to refuse to participate in. We don't have to draw attention to it. I don't have to post it on Facebook. Hey, everybody, listen, I'm not doing this. I'm not watching this show. I'm not subscribing to Netflix anymore. Hey, I want everybody to know I'm not doing it. We don't have to do that. Daniel didn't go trumpet it to everybody. He only told who needed to be told, but he quietly resisted. Why? Because he wasn't going to go down that path. And he had his brothers, his friends, and none of them were going to go down that path. They put a stake in the ground and they said, we're not going there. We don't have to tell everybody else. We don't have to make a big deal about it. We don't have to be jerks about it, but we're not going there. And we would be a lot better off if Christians would follow in Daniel's example and be willing to say, we're not going there. I'm not going down that path. I don't have to make a big deal about it. I don't have to tell everybody. I don't have to make an announcement, but I'm not going there. Now, yeah, if somebody asks, I'll tell them and I'll explain why. But I'm not going to be a jerk about it. I'm just going to be faithful. I'm just going to be faithful. The third thing that I think we can learn from this is that our faith, our only hope, and our only faith can be in God's power. Daniel did not trust in Babylon. He didn't trust in the king. He didn't trust in its food. He didn't trust in its teaching methods. He trusted in God. He hoped in God, and he hoped in him alone. And because of that, God preserved and sustained Daniel and his friends. One of the dangers that we have, and when I say this, I don't know. I guess I feel like people misunderstand me because we hear something and we immediately assume a whole lot of other things, and usually those assumptions are not always true. One of the dangers of living in a country where we have the privilege and the right to vote, the responsibility, the privilege to vote, is we can start to think that our destiny is in our hands. And we can start to think that if I just make the right vote, if I go in and I do the right campaigning and all of this, that we're going to be able to fix things and to make things right. And here's the reality: that as wonderful as the right to vote is, and I think it is. I mean, I exercise it every opportunity that I have. I also recognize that my vote is one vote among millions. And the reality is that I can make that vote, but it is going to get lost in a sea of other votes that don't think or believe like I do. And so it can give us this sort of sense of control that we really don't have. But that's nothing to despair about. And so I don't say that because I'm trying to discourage you from voting. Not at all, not at all, not at all. Vote, vote, vote. You know, especially if you know the issues. Vote, vote, vote. But what I'm saying is that that's not where our hope lies. That there is a God in heaven who steers the hearts of kings. And he is the one in whom we hope. And he is the one in whom our faith is. And he is still in control no matter who is in the White House, no matter who runs the Senate or the House, no matter who is governor of any state, no matter who is in control of China, no matter which country we live in, no matter who is, ascendant or descendant, if that's a word. We have a God in heaven who sits on the throne and who steers the hearts of kings and is in control at all times. And our faith and our hope must be in him and in him alone, no matter what. If it is in anything else, you will be disappointed. That's just the reality. We'll end with verse 21. And this should also give us tremendous hope. Verse 21, and Daniel continued until the first year of Cyrus the king. Gives us an important reminder. Here Daniel is, as a young man, he goes to Babylon. He's taken by Nebuchadnezzar, put through this Babylonian youth, trained in all the ways of the Babylonians. Nebuchadnezzar is the king. He's the most powerful man in the world, and he is in control. But the reality is, as this verse reminds us, his reign is coming to an end. There will come a day when Nebuchadnezzar passes away. When he's gone, Daniel remains. There will be a day when not only Nebuchadnezzar is gone, but this kingdom, Babylon, is gone. In fact, Daniel will live to see that day when the Babylonian kingdom perishes and collapses under the weight of the Persians. And Cyrus, the king of Persia, takes over. And there's one consistent thing, actually there's two consistent things from this moment here in Daniel chapter 1 to the very end of Daniel. And those two consistent things are Daniel, who remains in a position of influence and authority, not only under Nebuchadnezzar, but under Belshazzar and under Darius and under Cyrus. But even greater than that, there is a God who upholds Daniel through all of those. And so while the kings and the kingdoms of this world are in constant flux, and while the kings and the kingdoms of this world are rising and falling, there is a God who stands beneath and over it all, and who is in utter control. And Daniel's destiny is not tied to Babylon, and it's not tied to Nebuchadnezzar. It is tied to a God who is sovereign over all things. And if our hope and our faith is in that same God, then our destiny is not tied to a political party or to a politician or to a state or even to a nation, because all of those things will fall and be crushed, as we'll learn in the next chapter. Instead, our destiny is tied to a God who is sovereign, and to his kingdom, and to the king who reigns over that kingdom, whose name is Jesus. Daniel chapter 1, verses 8 through 21. It is my hope that as we read this, that we would be encouraged, that no matter what happens out there in the culture, we have a God who gives us stability and who sustains us. And I would encourage you tonight, as always, to look towards him, to put your faith and your hope in him and in him alone, because he is the only one who will carry you through thick and through thin, through all of the changes, political and otherwise, in this world. And he's the one who will reign, not just for 4 years or 8 years, but for all eternity. Next week, we'll meet once again at 7 o'clock, and we will continue looking at Daniel. We'll look at chapter 2 and start to look at this vision that Nebuchadnezzar has. This is one of the most significant visions in the Old Testament, in all of the Bible, because of the way that it points to Jesus and his kingdom ruling over all. So I hope and I pray that y'all have a wonderful night. And if you got any questions or thoughts or complaints, leave me a comment. Let me know. I'd love to hear, and I would love to respond and discuss those things. Anyway, I love y'all, and I look forward to seeing you soon. God bless you.